We now need to have safe words and a process of phone verification to a known good number whenever there's financial transactions in place. Because the CEO or the CFO in our remote work environment is not down the hall, they're in another state. And they are deep faking a phone call to the CFO saying, wire this money for this bill to this person.
Welcome to AI Experience, the podcast that demystifies artificial intelligence. My name is Julien Redelsperger, and we are going to find out how AI is changing the world. And I'm super happy to welcome Craig Taylor. He's a certified information systems security professional since 2001 and a 30-year veteran of cybersecurity. In 2014, he co-founded a cybersecurity training company called CyberHoots to help SMBs and SMPs learn cyber literacy. So today we will talk about AI and cybersecurity. Thank you for joining me. How are you, Craig?
Julien, I'm great today. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Very happy to meet today. We're going to have a great conversation about cybersecurity and AI. But just to start broad, in your own words, how would you even define what is cybersecurity today?
Well, cybersecurity for me and for many of these practitioners that I communicate with is all about the data that we possess. Our businesses don't run without data. And protecting that data in the traditional three ways of confidentiality, availability, integrity is important. And there are new threats to it. So, we have to adapt as we go forward. AI is bringing thousands of new companies a year onto the market. And what are they doing with our data? Right? We've already seen, since we're on a web conference here, we've already seen a lawsuit against Otter.ai for illegally recording conversations across millions of Zoom meetings or video meetings and selling it potentially to third parties. If you look at any of those AI tools, they have very lax privacy policies that allow them to monetize our conversations. So I kick them all out, honestly. But in a nutshell, it's all about the data from my perspective. How do we get it in the hands of the people who need it, limit it to only what they need, and have a lifespan on that data so it's not accumulating over time? Some of the worst compromises I've had to deal with were, one was a law firm and they had 30 years of data accumulated. They didn't have to go back more than 5 years, 80 to 90% of the time. Why have 30 years of data stolen? So now they have to notify, identify contacts. It was a nightmare scenario for them. And many companies just accumulate, and they don't offline anything. They don't purge anything. It's the data can be your friend and it can be your worst enemy.
Every week, if not every day, we hear about data breach, data leak, data, being stolen.
Yep.
Is it possible for our personal data to be safely
No.
stored somewhere?
I would say we're in the post-personal private data world, right? The NPD breach from last year, and I don't know if you covered this too much in Canada, but in the United States, there are these credit providers. They collect private credit data and they sell it to the Experians, the Equifax, the Innovis, and the TransUnions of the world. Well, NPD was one of them, the National Public Database, and it was breached. And a nice gentleman somewhere in the world stood up a website where you could go see what data of yours or mine was in the NPD breach. My social security number was attached not only to every house I had lived in the last 20 years and visible, they redacted it on this website, but even my ex-wife's houses where I had never lived, I was attached to them. So there's a lot of bad data out there that is still being breached. I don't think there's any way for, I guess probably our kids, maybe if you have young children or I have young children, they haven't published their data in enough places yet to have it breached. And perhaps there's hope for them, but I seriously doubt it. I think all of our data is out there. It's how we protect what they do with it. For example, in the US, we can freeze credit. You don't have to monitor it. You can freeze it. And if you freeze your credit, no one can get a score for you, Julien. And therefore, anyone that tries to put credit in my name can't, because they can't get a score and they can't decide what to offer me. They can't monetize it. So one of the best practices that we have is we recommend freezing your credit just to prevent some of those things from happening, identity theft and
So
whatnot.
for you and me, it's too late. But for our kids, they may have a chance.
They may have a chance, although it's doubtful.
So you've been in this field for decades, Craig. How do you see cybersecurity evolve from the early days to the AI-driven landscape that we are now?
Well, I think it's evolved in really interesting ways, really damaging ways. It is much the same today as it was 20 years ago. Let me put that into context. 20 years ago, there's an annual report from Verizon. They accumulate all the breach data they can get from all over the world, from Interpol, from the FBI, CIA, all these different places, governments, and they do an analysis of how breaches happen. And, in 2023, about 3 years ago, 2 years ago now, they did an analysis over time and they said, guess what, folks? The same breaches, the same methods of attack and breach are happening today as happened 20 years ago. Unpatched systems, credential abuse, and phishing attacks, social engineering via phishing attacks are all the top three ways companies are breached today. Now, how has that changed? Well, today, when you're breached, there's a lot more than single extortion happening. For example, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, a ransomware attack would encrypt your files. And if you had three options, three really. You could break the encryption because it wasn't ironclad and recover your data. You could restore from backup and recover your data. Or you could pay the ransom and potentially recover your data. Those were the options. Today, however, there's quadruple extortion happening. And I can only talk about three of those ways. I will not give hackers any additional insight into the fourth extortion method. You can ask me after this call. The first is, of course, to encrypt the data and hold it ransom. The second, they exfiltrate it and they threaten to release it online. The third is, if you're in a regulated industry, they threaten to report you to the authorities and you'll get fined and sanctioned for not reporting a breach quickly enough because the hackers report you. And then you have the option then still to pay for the ransom event and get your data back, or restore and suffer the breach costs of a regulatory fine, for example. So that's a triple. And there is a fourth way that they're doing it, which is very devious and diabolical, and we can talk about that at another time. But what the point is the consequences of a breach are far larger today. The impact of the breach is much greater today. The speed of the breach is much quicker today. They talked about dwell times a decade ago. Dwell times could be 6 months of sitting in the network trying to figure out how to make the next move. Now it's so automated, they break in. In fact, we wrote about this on a blog, Julien. There are now, you remember Henry Ford was the one that created the assembly line for automobiles. And he decided that it would be much more efficient if these people put the wheels on the car and these people painted the cars and these people built the chassis and everyone had their job. Hackers have started doing that. There are now brokers out there who breach companies but don't do anything with the breach. They sell it to the ransomware groups who can then monetize it in some way. And they've broken up the different stages of attacks, and they are now selling access to companies or access to bot networks or access to malware engines where you can hide your tracks with it. And each of these is doing their own specific part of the attack and passing it on to the next organization.
So have attackers became better at the job, or is it just because our security systems became weaker? Like, what's the explanation? Why do we have so many attacks, successful attacks and data breach these days?
Well, I think in the last case I gave you where they're breaking this up, it is harder to track down perpetrators when the people whose log entries show the breach and then someone else exploits it, and they come from different nations of the world. They come from different IP ranges and spaces, and they hide their tracks differently. Piecing together what happened becomes much more difficult if The breach started in South Africa, but it was through, companies and computers in either Russia or China. And then the actual exploitation happened from someone in South Korea or North Korea or, Singapore. All of these different threads have to be unraveled to identify what happened in a breach, and it becomes very problematic. Attribution is extremely difficult. So some of the reasons for what we're talking about are to hide and obfuscate the attribution and the source of the breach. But to answer your question about, are the hackers getting better? um, yes, I think they are, generally speaking. I think that's a fair statement, because the malware and the breach methods are much more streamlined today. If you go back 15, 20 years ago, you had to be an elite hacker to be able to write code to take advantage of ransomware and these sorts of things. Now you don't need to be an elite hacker. You can just buy it on dark web forums and then use it however you see fit. You don't even have to breach companies. You can buy that. You can buy all the tools you need. Sort of like, imagine 50 years ago, lockpicks, right? You had to fashion and cut your lockpick yourself. Now you can go buy a lockpick kit, right? And you can watch YouTube videos to train yourself on how to do it. So the same has happened in hacking today.
Since ChatGPT's launch in 2022, so more than 3 years ago, what has fundamentally changed for attackers and for defenders? Like, is Gen AI made your job easier or harder?
It's made it a little harder. I think the ability, when we talk about the sophistication of phishing attacks, right? 10 years ago, it was a splay and pray kind of attack. You would email a million people hoping a few people would click, and there was no personalization. Nowadays, with AI, you can point it at Craig's or Julian's social media or public profiles or, Google search information, and you can create an automated phishing attack that is appealing to you and I based on our interests, based on our public profiles. And oh, by the way, that can be done with a Chinese native speaker, a Russian native speaker, an English native speaker, Swahili native speaker, and it can be perfectly translated through AI into whatever language or target audience you have. And it's almost indistinguishable. Maybe today there's still nuances around dialects or nuances around cultural norms that might not be 100% perfect. The way things are written in French don't translate perfectly into English and vice versa. There may be some word choice differences. But AI has got such, if it's translating into English, where AI has trained the bulk of its knowledge, the translations are perfect, right? So coming from any foreign language into English, you're going to get very, very good translations because there's such a large body of data training the models. So the spear phishing is becoming the norm rather than the splay and pray approach, meaning phishing attacks are getting much better. Social engineering attacks are getting much better. I think it's enhanced the ability for people to want to click on things.
Yeah.
And I don't think the marketplace or the cybersecurity profession as a whole has done a good job of training users on how to spot and avoid these social engineering attacks. I think we're behind.
And now you don't only have emails or text, but you have like text to speech or text to videos, so people can get, new channels, new media to earn trust.
Mhm.
How does that change? Like, do you see them happening from time to time? Is it like mainstream now among the attackers?
There was this big fear about 12 months ago when the first video deepfakes were on, I think maybe even 2 years ago. If you remember America's Got Talent or Idol, one of these TV shows had an act where they resurrected Elvis Presley and one other dead singer. And there was a real singer in the background behind a green screen singing, and they were basically deep faking onto Elvis Presley. And it was I think it was indistinguishable for many. I think the more sophisticated listeners at that moment probably could catch a blip here or there. But it really scared a lot of people. Like, can we believe video anymore? And this was 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. Um, Most recently, we had a Super Bowl ad last year, almost 12 months ago, completely created by artificial intelligence. AI created the Super Bowl ad, and it was indistinguishable. We ourselves at my company, Cyberhoop, produce videos completely on AI, and we used to get criticism for AI artifacts. Now there's comments in our feedback that thank you for getting rid of the AI. It's not, it's still there. Video and AI is becoming completely indistinguishable from reality. I mean, outside of the whimsical nature of a lot of AI videos, like I saw one the other day, Nano Banana had these whales floating in the air above a beach, right? Well, of course that's AI driven because you don't see that. But when it's real life scenarios, it's indistinguishable.
When you discuss cybersecurity with CEO, business professionals, or managers, what do they tell you? Are they aware of the risks and the reality of the market?
No, I believed strongly that the technology is far outstripping our knowledge of what it can do, the risks it presents, and how we can protect ourselves from it. We have produced a video in our 2026 program for our SMB and mid market and enterprise markets that talks about deep fakes, Julien. And it says we now need to have safe words and a process of phone verification to a known good number whenever there's financial transactions in place, because the CEO or the CFO in our remote work environment is not down the hall. They're in another state, and they are deep faking a phone call to the CFO saying, wire this money for this bill to this person. And it's bogus. And that has happened not just once, twice, it's happening with regularity today. And if you simply ask for our company safe word, our financial safe word, you're going to thwart many of those attacks. And if the safe word is not present, but there's some case to be made that it could be real, then hang up the phone and call the CEO back on their mobile, on the CFO or whoever it is making the request. Make sure you validate. This has to be the norm in today's world. That's what we're seeing, and fortunately, the solution is pretty straightforward.
Mhm.
And by the way, Julian, that goes for families too. I have personally had a family member try to go to the bank to withdraw $10,000 to pay for her grandson to get out of jail. And it was thwarted because one of my family, I don't want to get into the specifics, but one of my brothers um, called the grandson and said, "How you doing?" And he says, "Fine, I'm great." And with the person that was being targeted, right, an elderly person, and that is happening with great regularity today. So if you have a family safe word, or at least have a conversation with your parents, our parents, right, the 60, 70, 80-year-olds in the world, to say this is happening. We're facing the entire globe of humans, 8 billion, whatever the number is, can pick up the phone with AI and place a phone call that sounds like your grandson who did a TikTok video outside of Australia, I guess, today, right? Like this week. So we have to have these safe words for personal families and also for businesses.
So, safe words, it's probably the basic things to do in terms of cybersecurity for your family, for your business. That's what I understand.
Yes.
So, we briefly mentioned Gen AI. I want to pause on agentic AI because they are capable of taking multi step actions by their own.
Yes.
What worries you most about that evolution?
Well, there was a report not too long ago from I believe it was Claude, where a foreign nation state successfully conducted a series of attacks with agentic AI against US businesses, enterprises, and it was lightning quick because it took the data from step one and passed it to step two. In between those steps, there was a validation. The data made sense. There was no hallucination involved. And if the data from step one was known good, it passed to step two, and so on through 4 or 5 steps. And the makers of the AI wrote a report about this that said, listen, we know that this happened. They jailbroke the AI to do these things. And the steps were very quick. AI can do really monotonous work that takes weeks and months and shorten it to days and weeks. And so for these steps in the agentic AI, and if you look at the anatomy of a breach, there's reconnaissance, there's initial breach methodology, there's land and expand within the network once you get in. All of those measures and steps are accelerated by AI, properly, jailbroken AI that can do these things. And so agentic AI is going to become if you go back to Star Wars, right? There's an escalation in the space race back in the 80s and 90s with the United States and Russia, and it's happening similarly in cybersecurity realms where agentic AI agents can scan millions of targets and identify every open port, and then look for not only known vulnerabilities, right? The KEVs. It can also identify new things, right? It can say, oh, SSL VPNs have been exploited multiple times, and there are these methodologies for exploiting an SSL VPN in a firewall. There have been a lot of 0 days identified. Well, it can basically enumerate and attempt, multiple new attacks to see if there's a way to breach, the current SSL VPNs that have been patched, to say, oh, did they really fix all these things or not? So I think agentic AI agents will be good at identifying new 0 days. They'll be built into the attack methodologies. I don't know that they're going to be super successful at that. I think there was a contest recently where agentic AI agents were tested to break into um, uh, an environment, like not a honeypot, but a staged environment. And it was compared against 10 really good hacking organizations or individuals. And all but one hacker was bested by the AI agentic agents. There was one hacker that apparently did better. I can't remember the source of that information. I guess you could Google that, or you could AI search that. But the reality is we know for what, 25, 30 years, how long has it been since Kasparov, the chess genius, was bested by Deep Blue? Or was it Deep Blue? It was IBM's supercomputer from probably 20 years ago, right? And Kasparov won the first game, lost the second, and before the third game started, he says, "The computer is learning my thinking methods. It's reacting to me better than I can outthink the computer. I don't believe I can beat it again." Agentic AI is going to do the same thing for hacking. Is going to do so. It's a very scary world from that perspective.
I'm sure you heard about the term vibe coding, which is basically the fact that you can use any tool to set up an app, create anything digital. Do you think that it makes it easier now to be an attackers or defenders in cybersecurity? Can you use vibe coding to actually create attacks or good strategy for defense?
So here's where I think there's some good news. Yes, you can do vibe coding to build applications, to hack and to build malware and things of that nature, but it is still in the beginning stages of producing code, from what I've gathered. What do I mean by that? You can have vibe coding create really functional applications, but unless you understand programming really well, you can't troubleshoot it when it breaks. You can't optimize it for quick execution. I don't know the quality of the code, and I'll be the first to say I'm not a developer, so I don't have deep insights into this. But I am very scared of an application that was developed in vibe coding and how it will survive the long run, because no one really understands probably how the thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of lines of code are all constructed together, and troubleshooting it and finding problems in it. I'm very afraid of that. Now, maybe I'm not the right judge of this question. I'll be honest, Julian, I don't do enough coding to know um, authoritatively the answer to that question. But my sense is that, you know, you have to be let's put it in a different context. I ask a lot of cybersecurity questions of AI, and I get answers back that are sometimes very insightful and sometimes very wrong. It's all the data that's been fed. So, for example, 20 years ago, NIST said 9-character complex passwords that change every 90 days was the best. And so you can ask AI what are good password policies and strategies, and it'll spit out some really bad advice because it's been trained on bad data. Uh, Maybe the same is true for coding, vibe coding. I'm not sure.
Okay. So you've worked in many different industries. Which one do you think is the most unprepared for AI driven cyber attacks today in the US or in North America?
I think all companies in all industries are ill prepared. Let me explain in that way. You know, I had this debate yesterday in a Reddit thread with someone who's very knowledgeable, and we were arguing different sides of what the biggest threats companies face today are, but we didn't qualify the size of the company. If you look at the latest breach reports from Verizon and CISA, and maybe even Mandiant, you get interesting answers, but it all depends on what the target was. And what I mean by that is, was it an SMB? Was it a mid market or an enterprise? The biggest risks are different based on what your target attack is. Quite simply, hackers hackers are like water in a river. They follow the path of least resistance to breach their target. In the SMB space, that's social engineering, phishing, and maybe a little bit of password or credential hygiene issues. In mid market, it's moving towards credential abuse, privilege access abuse, and in enterprises, it's unpatched systems, it's vulnerabilities, KEVs, known exploit vulnerabilities, right? Because enterprises have such a larger scope of systems to identify and patch and protect. It's a very tall order to identify everything and keep it fully monitored and patched in an enterprise. So, depending on where you're looking, you have different risks. Now, you asked about AI and making this more dangerous. Well, AI can enumerate much more quickly than an individual hacker, and then can identify the CVEs or the vulnerabilities that might apply to the footprint or the thumbprint of the target system. And even then, if you didn't have a metasploit for that vulnerability, you could work with AI potentially, if you can convince it to do so, to vibe code an exploit for it. At the mid market, exploiting credentials, you can look into dark web locations. You can enumerate systems that aren't on MFA or don't have passkey support. And then in the SMB space, you can create phishing attacks, spear phishing attacks that are very appealing to the um, public, heads of that company on off their website.
So does that mean SMB's employees should stay quiet on social media or quit social media to avoid social engineering?
There's a much more existential threat from social media that we're all realizing. It's wasting so much of our times and our lives, and it's of limited utility. I think we should all quit social media, to the chagrin of Mark Zuckerberg. But no, I think it's just common sense is the best practice. Do not publish what you ate for dinner on social media. Nobody cares. It's not of interest to the majority of people, and it just leads to better phishing attacks against all of us. So yeah, limit what you your footprint online. I would say that's probably one of the best pieces of advice, is to uh, not only just limit it. You can hire companies that are out there that provide data scrubbing services, so they can identify, you have this email address, that email address, whatever the three email addresses, you live in these states, and any company that has data on those bits of information, it can issue data deletion requests, and scrub your identity from the online, from the public web, right? The private web and the dark web, it's out there. You can't get rid of it. So, but yes, limiting your social media and your public facing exposure is a very good thing.
If you had to design a basic AI security checklist for a small business, for example, what are the first three items that absolutely must be on it?
Well, you have to guide your employees, right? There are thousands of AI tools that are popping up every day, and they are monetizing our data without our permission, if you look at their privacy policies. So I would basically start from a position of nothing is approved. Do not use any AI systems or tooling until you've gotten approval from our IT team. And how that approval works would be all about the data, going back to our very first question. Is it a public LLM? Will it consume our data and share it and sell it and market it to other companies? Or is it a private LLM? Today, Microsoft Copilot claims to be a private LLM. There are some tools that come out. We've partnered with, we haven't partnered with, but we've evaluated a tabletop company that did tabletop exercises, and their first version was on a public LLM. We said that will never fly, not for sensitive, critical conversations around tabletop exercises in companies. So they retooled under Amazon Bedrock, which is a private LLM, no consumption of data, right? It's just for basically recording who said what when, what was the, it has some very important metrics that it creates and calculates and tallies up for the tabletop exercise. So for an SMB, the first thing is your data has to be front and center in all conversations. Your users, they're going to be popping AI queries about business intelligence questions they get on their phones when their computers block access. So you can't just deny all. You have to educate why this matters, what the threats are, um, that hallucinations occur, sources are cited that don't exist, prompt injection, biases in AI. All this data that's been training AI is Western based. There's not a lot of Eastern philosophy in AI tools today. There's not a lot of, we could go on and on there. So, is that clear enough? I'm sorry, I'm probably muddying the water.
No, 100%. And actually, it makes me think of another question because I'm sure you know shadow IT, which is the use of a software not formally authorized by companies' IT departments.
Yes.
Now we hear about shadow AI, which is, for example, the use of ChatGPT or Gemini at work when it is not officially approved. What do you think about this practice? Is that a problem for companies?
It's a
And
huge problem.
why?
If you look at our website today, cyberroot.com/blog, you'll have an article that talks about AI poisoning
Mhm.
that is happening. This is something that has been common in the past in cybersecurity realms for DNS poisoning, for Google SEO poisoning. Basically, what this is hackers will publish fake phone support numbers about our favorite companies of the world, Microsoft or Google or Apple or what have you. And an AI bot scrapes that from these websites and says, oh, this is the number for Apple support. And so when someone else using Shadow AI asks for a number to call Microsoft support, they get the wrong number because it's been poisoned. But it's worse than that because it's, the look, Google and Microsoft Bing have been around a long time. They've figured out how not to be poisoned by their bots. They have triangulation and many orders of magnitude above that for verifying the information that they consume and then share. It's based on very good algorithms that say, hey, 57 websites point to this number rather than just one. But AI search and AI bots, they don't have such metrics built up where it says, hey, if there's not 12 different websites that are at a high domain reputation score calling out a support number. We shouldn't consume it and provide it. The metrics, the intelligence doesn't exist. And so you'll see an AI bot will create this, and there are AI website creation bots that are building very large reams of bogus data that other AI bots are coming along and consuming. So it's a perpetuation of the poisoning. And so soon, before too long, we're going to be in a world where we can't trust anything that AI spits out if we don't solve that problem. But this poisoning thing is a real problem, and shadow AI is going to be victims of it if we don't get in front of that and explain that these things are happening.
And how do you fight against shadow AI? Do you just block ChatGPT.com or Gemini.com?
No, absolutely not. What you have to do is embrace it, right? This is a little counterintuitive. If you want your end user, it's the Pandora's box, right? When it's closed, everyone's okay. Once it's open, everybody wants a piece of it. So that's what AI has become. Everybody wants to use AI to help craft emails, to analyze and predict sports scores for betting, whatever the case, investment opportunities, what have you. And we have to, as businesses, recognize the power of AI, the threat we all face from it, and embrace it and come up with secure, safe ways to use it and empower our employees to safely have an answer for this. So whether it's directing people to Copilot and having a registered service for that, or a private LLM from ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, you name it. Those LLMs can be configured and set up that where they don't consume the data, and they're available both on mobile and the company network or computers. And that allows the performance and the force multiplying effect that we're all seeking to make the drudgery parts of our jobs less painful, while also protecting the data. And so that's where I think we need to go, by fully embracing it and finding safe, secure solutions that our employees can turn to, instead of, it's like anything. When COVID hit and everybody worked from home and the printer wouldn't print from my my work computer, what did everybody do? They forwarded that sensitive spreadsheet on the forecast for next year to their personal Gmail and Yahoo accounts and printed it from there. And it was a, shadow. People will work around anything if you let them. So you have to empower them.
What do you like about your job, Craig?
Oh, well, in my world, so I was once enrolled in teachers college, Julien, to become a teacher. And I quickly abandoned that goal because the salaries for teacher are abysmal. Teachers are so important in this world to teach our children skill sets and things. But I was a cybersecurity professional. I had a psychology degree, and I thought teaching is a passion of mine. About 12 years ago, I decided to combine them all three: my degree in psychology and my 30 years of cybersecurity up until today, right? Back then it was 20 years, and educating people. And I founded my company, Cyberhoot. And what that did was allow me to fulfill my passions in this world, to teach people important, simple things around cyber literacy, cyber hygiene, so that they can be protected from the entire globe of attackers that are out there trying to exploit each and every one of us. So I have a wonderful, wonderful job where my company Cyberhood is creating me such satisfaction to provide these educational videos and a positive reinforcement approach to teaching people how phishing works. There's another big problem today in cybersecurity, Julien, where for reasons I cannot understand, we've been focused on punishing bad behaviors in the world. I call it sticks for clicks, bigger sticks. Let's whack these employees over the head until they stop clicking on things. That Look, it doesn't work in dog training. It doesn't work in parenting, child rearing. It doesn't work even on incarcerated adults. You have to teach real good skills to replace the bad ones and reward and reinforce those good skills when you see them in your child, in your dog, in your human that made a mistake and went to jail. You have to teach them coping skills and better methods and reinforce those, or else they will never repeat those behaviors. As soon as you remove the punishment, they will click. Even with the punishment, if it's really appealing, they will click. So my background, my unique background in psychology and education and cybersecurity has allowed me to focus our platform at Cyberhood on a positive experience of here are the good behaviors you need to learn, rewarding those, gamifying those, creating certificates of completion, all kinds of good things. So I guess the long-winded answer to you is I love my job. I am happy to go to work every day. I'm making a difference, not me only. There is 3 co-founders in Cyberhood that are amazing, amazing people. And together we get to build something that helps the world fight back against all of these threats we've been talking about.
Perfect. Well noted. Thank you so much. So at the end of each episode, Craig, the guest answers a question posed by the previous guest. Are you ready?
I am.
Perfect. So here's your question, courtesy of Khushbu Jha, who is founder and CEO of a fintech called Buy Properly. We can listen to her question right now.
So my question is, in the world of AI-driven content, we all get a lot of inbound of AI-written emails and AI-written ads. How do you choose when to actually engage with the AI content? So reply to that AI email. And when do you choose not to reply because it was written by AI?
Wow, that is a real problem. And I'll be honest, in our marketing efforts, we did adopt some AI email, outbound cold email outreach, and it was very poor. It had no results. So we gave up on that. I would say you don't engage with it. If you want to get my attention, you have to do so for first something that I have a need for, and you have to make it very personal, and you have to make it invisible from any AI sort of communication. On the flip side of that, yesterday in my communications on Reddit, in this very important conversation around it's all, like the gentleman that I was communicating with said, it's all about privilege account management and vulnerability management. I'm like, no, social engineering and users are the weakest link. And he goes, that's a decade old advice. And I said, no, it's not. I see it every day. We see breaches every day. We had to contextualize where we were thinking. But I used AI to go look at the CISA report, the Mandiant report, and the Verizon data breach report and summarize why are we at odds with one another? Who's correct? And they said, well, this gentleman's correct in the enterprise space, but you're correct in this SMB and mid-market space. So you're both correct, depending on what audience you're thinking about. AI was able to summarize 3 30-page reports, compare and contrast it, and give me 3 bullet points of content that made perfect sense to my well-trained experience. So at the end of the day, you can't not use AI to summarize data for you and learn about it, but you have to know your audience. And many people are diametrically opposed to any AI email outreach, ads, and that sort of thing. So, I think it's just there's not a lot of place for sales and marketing with AI, but there is a place for self-improvement and knowledge gain.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And now, what question would you like to pose for the next guest?
In the world of cybersecurity, if you could only do 3 things, what would those 3 methods or bits of advice, and let's take SMBs as the target audience. What would your 3 methods or 3 best practices be for an SMB to protect itself? And where does AI help or hinder those 3 areas?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Craig. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Julien. It was my pleasure.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform. Your support counts and your comments can really help share this experience with others. You can also visit the website ai-experience.io to find out more. See you soon for a new episode.